Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast, No More Secrets. I'm your aunt, Mary Albrecht.
I'm your niece, Katie Albrecht.
We are the authors of Broken Neck, our memoir about my brother, Katie's father, and his life of mental illness. Our goal is to use this podcast as a platform for others to share their stories and perhaps come to find their truth and live the most authentic life possible. Last week we talked about the general concept of happiness and what it means to us and others. This week we would like to take it a step further and discuss whether or not someone can choose to be happy. Can someone actually will themselves to happiness? What do you think, Katie? Let's talk about this. Have you ever had any problems willing yourself to happiness?
Yes,
Okay.
many times. I think growing up in the household that I did, I definitely faced a lot of bouts of depression, honestly. And I realized kind of as an adult that I think I was depressed probably more than I realized back then. I, but the times that I can remember specifically, I'm thinking about when I was a senior in high school, and I was the youngest. I was the youngest in my household, so I was kind of the last one with my dad. And for those of you that have read the book, he was the one that we had written it about. He, at that point in his life, had just gone through an accident where he got severe frostbite on his hands, and he was on prescription painkillers. Not that there wasn't the only thing that he had ever done. He was an alcoholic before then. But at that point, when there was all the attention on me, I think I became very depressed from it.
Because you were the last one at home,
I was the
and he
last one
was
at
probably
home.
in the worst place of his life with the hands
Yeah,
being injured.
yeah, if not the worst, then pretty close to it. And all of the problems, all of the screaming, all of the negative attention, I think, was focused on me.
Because your mom was working?
My mom was working, yeah, she kept her head as high as she could. I mean, but the way that she did it was by getting out of the house, and she would work a lot. For me, if there was times where I didn't have practice after school or wasn't at a friend's house, it would just be me and him, and it was awful. It brought a lot of bad feelings out
So
from
what
it.
what were your symptoms when you think you were actually depressed?
There was a lot of wanting to just stay in bed. There was a lot of I would flip-flop. You know how with depression it's not just one solid mood and nothing's the same every single time. Some nights you cry yourself to sleep, and other times you feel this kind of nothingness.
Yeah.
And I think I faced a lot of both, where I just would cry a lot and I would get angry a lot because of that. I think when people get sad and not just sad, but just in that state of depression, their skin becomes a little bit thinner, and everything, even though I was in a volatile household, everything seemed like it was amped up more so than I could even handle at that point. So I was very angry. I was yelling. My classmates didn't know anything about this. I think we talked about this a little bit. Sorry, I dropped my notebook. We talked about this a little bit in our last episode where we kind of put on a face.
We were good at it.
We were really good at it. But I remember in high school, I was very good at it. And a lot of my friends didn't know that this was happening to me.
So you didn't talk to anybody about it or go for help?
Not during that time. There's been other situations where I've gone to therapy. So when I was in middle school, I remember I went to art therapy, where I got to talk to a therapist and literally doodle as she was talking to me, which
Cool.
yeah, it was really, really cool, especially for me who always am just doodling anyway. It just kind of worked out to be able to clear my mind in both ways that way.
So how, during that senior year of high school, again, I didn't know you at all at that point.
Yeah.
Um, how did you pull out of it? How did you, did you know that you were depressed, or is that in hindsight? And if so, how did you pull out of it? In general, how did you get happy again?
I think during that time of depression, what I did to pull myself out of it, I think I was really lucky because I was in sports and I had kind of a natural antidepressant with the exercise back then.
Good point. Yep.
But I tried to focus on my friends more and try to spend more time with them. It didn't always work because I struggled a lot and they didn't know a lot that was going on. I think it was just eventually doing the things that made me feel happy versus just sitting in my room and crying. And so I think when we talk about is if happiness is a choice or not, I think it depends. Like I was able to somehow pull myself out just by doing the actions that made me feel good, but I know that there's other people who have it differently, and I know you've mentioned otherwise, right?
Yeah, I mean, mine was a whole different scenario in high school. It was right about the same time, though. My junior year of high school is
Hmm.
when I started crying for no reason,
Yeah.
feeling separated from everybody, like I was looking through a dirty glass that was surrounding me, and I wasn't part of it. And people were
Oh, that's
laughing.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, they were people were laughing, having fun, experiencing the high school life, and I was like stuck behind this dirty window or whatever, kind of looking in, wishing I could feel that way. Um, a real heavy weight on me. I felt heavy. I felt like everything was such a struggle, and for me, I simply I didn't even know what was going on, but I knew it had to do with Ken,
Right.
my
Same with me.
brother. Yeah, your dad. He brought that out because it was just a constant battle to get any kind of normal life or peace with him in your life, in your household. And for me, obviously, the abuse was a lot more extensive, which I shared in the first episode. So I ended up having a complete meltdown, and my parents sent me to a psychiatrist, and they put me on antidepressants. And I have to say that I remember to this day where I was sitting and what I was wearing when the depression lifted. And I remember the
Hmm.
psychiatrist saying, it's going to be about 2 weeks for the medicine to get into your system. And it was like, gosh, maybe it was like 12 days or something. And all of a sudden, I had hope again. I had all of the same problems. Ken was still very much there, abusing me, controlling me. I was still, trying to catch up from things that I had missed and all of that, but I could handle it better because my head was clear. I wasn't looking through that dirty glass anymore. The
Yeah.
the medication basically for me just gave me a tool so that then I could start doing the actions that you talk about, Katie, to
Yeah.
make yourself feel better. But prior to that, I didn't want to live. I mean, I even attempted suicide during that period of time. So depression definitely depends on the situation. Everybody's different with it, but I think the important thing is that it exists, and that we acknowledge it.
Yeah. I think so. Something you said something interesting. You've said that you remember the moment where it started to lift, and it's when you started to feel hope again. Do you think that depression is the same thing as a loss of hope?
Wow, that's a really good question. I do.
Yeah.
You have to have hope. If there's no hope in this world, there's no reason to be here. And
Right.
there are so many people that don't have hope. it's kind of interesting that you mentioned the word hope, because I read in an article, I don't even remember which one because I'm always reading so much about this stuff, but
Yeah, likewise.
yeah, I think we have to stay sane, but we're
It's not
saying
working.
it's not working. We need some better help. But one of the articles used the word hope as an acronym. So H period, O period, P period, E period, for hang on, pain ends.
Oh, I love that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a different scenario with everybody. We're obviously all of this is launching from our shared experiences with this person, Ken, that, we wrote about, my brother and Katie's father. And he was a completely different story. Like, I never really understood why he didn't want to. It seemed like he didn't want to get better. I don't know how it was for you growing up, but it seemed like that was his whole persona, was being an angry, depressed, violent, narcissistic sociopath. That's all.
Oh, yeah, that's it. Short list.
Short list.
Well, yeah, and I think I mean, most of the time we've agreed on this in the past where we try to keep the peace a little bit, where we try to be a little bit not as argumentative to let him simmer out, but that just doesn't work all the time. Most of the time it didn't work. And there was times where, I mean, I would wake up, actually most of my childhood, I remember waking up to 3 a.m. and hearing him screaming from downstairs or in the other room or something.
At somebody, or?
Yeah, like it would usually be my mom. Unfortunately, she was the main target. When she wasn't around, it was all the rest of us kids. And it was, there was times when I remember when she would fight back. I'd hear her voice mixed in with his voice. And I just remember thinking that was one of the coolest moments, because I was like, yeah, Mom, you should stand up for yourself. This is awesome that you're doing that.
And it's wrong to accept that kind of screaming and behavior at any time, much less almost every night.
And sometimes you just have to, to keep your own sanity. You have to match his anger and his screaming with your own. And it doesn't work because he always wins. He always won,
It's like you couldn't outlast him.
You couldn't outlast him. He had the stamina of 1,000 horses when it came to anger.
Which is interesting, because I always thought that he had that more because of youth when we were growing up. And so when you and I got to know each other, and I realized, oh my God, he's still screaming like 1,000 horses decades later, after he's abused his body and then had his accident in the snow and now addicted to opioids and all that. He's still able to carry on that level of anger and emotion and still beat us, still win, still outlast us. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I guess with people like that, especially him, I don't think that he wanted to change. I mean, it's pretty obvious that he didn't. If he would have, I mean, I think his family members that loved him and said that you're hurting me would have stopped it, but that wasn't the case.
There was a part in the book when I was writing about that. I don't know, can't remember exactly what chapter it was, but it was about something about mental illness and how can somebody ever get better if part of the illness itself is that they don't want to.
Right. Yeah, that was a really good point.
And I believe that Ken's illness was working for him, because he got everything he wanted whenever he would act out, whatever it was: screaming, depression, crying, manipulating, out drinking, whatever it was. He eventually got what he wanted, whether it be money, or people giving in to him, or people telling him he's loved and he's great.
Or people getting off of his case.
Off of his case, right.
When really we're just doing what my mom did in those times. We're just standing up for ourselves because we're trying to protect our own sanity, But he twisted it into being, we're on his case. We're the ones that are making him feel bad. It's just over and over again. We couldn't win.
And we didn't have the support of others around us because at any one time, not everyone had the will to stand up to him. So,
We all would at separate times, yeah.
right.
And when another person did, it almost felt like it took a weight off of our backs to be like, okay, we don't have to do it today. Someone else is doing it. But it was the wrong mentality because if all of us worked together to help him, it might have been a different scenario.
Exactly. And I remember talking with Grandma about this several times, but mostly in the last decade, that she just felt like he didn't have the brain power to get better. And that was her excuse for continuing to enable him to be awful to us, because his illness was emotional versus physical. She would say, Mary, you have physical anemia, which I do. That's a separate topic. Well, he has emotional anemia. So-and-so has cancer. He has emotional cancer.
He was emotional cancer to us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would say, but if somebody has cancer, you seek treatment. And if they won't seek treatment, hopefully the people around him kind of rally around and say, you need to go get treatment because we want you better.
Yeah.
And that's where I think we dropped the ball, where we let him down, because I think, yeah, a lot of articles talk about who would choose to be depressed. Well, I think he actually liked it because it worked for him. And I think he didn't know how to not be. And I think had he come to the other side, he might have ended up enjoying being happy.
Do you think, so of all the stuff that happened with him that you had mentioned, him being, a sociopath, narcissist, drug addict, do you think all that stemmed from maybe him being depressed in his childhood?
Yeah, I definitely think he was born mentally ill. I've said that before. What's interesting is that when my mom, this is a case for some therapists, because when my mom was pregnant with Ken, it was in the worst period of her life. She was depressed herself. She was emotional. Her husband had just gotten shipped off to France because he was in the army. It was the Berlin Wall was coming down. It was going to be a Cuban Missile Crisis, all of that. They were thinking they were going to World War III. She was separated from her new husband, and she was pregnant. She was so interested in world affairs, but she was so depressed. She cried and cried and cried until she got over to France and got to be with her husband, and that's where my brother was born. So you fast forward to a few months later when I was born, everything was different. World War III was averted. They were out of the army. They had an apartment. They had friends. They both had good, solid jobs. Everything was happy. And my mom had me in that period of time, and I turned out to be a really happy-go-lucky child, and he turned out to be not only so severely depressed and emotional, but really, really obsessed with that period of time. I mean, he was born in 1962, and that was all happening in 1962, and when he became older, he started to be completely obsessed with the Kennedy family, which is, he was assassinated in 63, and he became an expert on it. And I have a feeling that this is a whole different topic for specialists to talk about, but something in that pregnancy triggered his mental illness. And yeah, he was born depressed probably. And I think Grandma felt that way and maybe felt a little guilty. And that's another reason she tried to make it better for him by letting him do whatever he wanted the rest of his life.
Yeah. Okay, so I can agree with you on the Kennedy thing. I remember I had to write a creative writing paper. This is actually a fond memory of him, where he kind of helped me slash pretty much wrote the whole thing. Sorry, Mr. Jackson, my teacher.
Thanks, Dad.
And it was about the assassination of Kennedy. So, I mean, that's just a fun fact about him. He was a really good writer for all that. I also found that chapter that you were talking about. It looks like it was in chapter 12 at the end of it. And I like a line that you put in here, and it says, Sandra once said he needs his own entry in the dictionary because no current words come remotely close to describing him. And I feel like that goes into like his history is really interesting, but we didn't have one word to describe this person, you know?
There was no way unless you're in it. You know, people say, oh, yeah, my brother's an alcoholic too, but then come to find he goes to work and brings home a good paycheck and is pretty happy most of the time. No, this person was miserable 99% of the time, to us and for himself. It was really extreme. And I am not sure what could have helped him choose happiness, which is pretty much what, the topic of this episode. But I do know that what we were doing wasn't working, and I wanted so badly to try something else. I wanted my parents to try anything else to get him to choose, the actions that perhaps would make him happy, or even medicate himself, like,
Right.
Without drinking, without other drugs. And it never happened. And I don't know, did you, while you guys were growing up, did your siblings or your mom ever talk to him about getting help or getting medicated or going to therapy or,
Yeah. Well, the problem with this kind of proves that he didn't want anything to change. When he would go to therapists and they would correct him on things, and I'm sure they weren't all bad or at it, or maybe there was some mistaken words that he chose or he heard or whatever, but these therapists he would be done with after a day because because he said that they were just out to get him.
Oh, because they might call him out on something or say
Yeah.
something
Yeah,
he
so
didn't like?
he's tried therapy. I mean, if you can call it that. I mean, after
Yeah.
one session, you can't really grow a whole lot, but I think the moral of the story is that he didn't want to grow. So whereas me and like what you were saying, how me and you had that willingness to want to change, he didn't have that. And that, I believe, is not, that's where happiness isn't a choice for some people.
You know, I talked to Uncle Stewart in the book, or Uncle Steve. So my younger brother, who's 8 years younger than me, he has issues of his own. There are some similarities between Steve and Ken, but ultimately, the one thing they had most in common, and Steve is the one that has convinced me of this, is that they were both so very lazy. Like they just longed to sit on that couch, sit on a couch, any couch. They couldn't wait. And Steve is still this way. He can't wait to get back to the couch.
That's a badge of honor right there. My
He
gosh.
just wants to be on the couch. And he admits it. And we have some really good conversations, and it's helping me understand both of my brothers. But he says that a lot of Ken's unwillingness to get better was just pure laziness. He just wanted it to be easy. He wanted things handed to him, and it's hard work to try to get yourself over a mental illness, a depression, or whatever. And so ultimately, he just wanted to sit on the couch, and he did.
He was so good at sitting on the couch.
He was like an Olympic champion.
Of sitting on the couch, yeah. Couch sitting was his medal.
The couch had an indent in it with his body shape.
Man, that's a bonded relationship, I got to tell you.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting too, and that some people are just downright lazy, and Steve knows that he's a lazy person. He thinks life is a hassle. He doesn't like having to, oh my God, I gotta get the mail in. That's like just one more thing. Oh my God, that's so awful. So I think there's that element too. So there was a myriad. Ken really got the best people around him or the worst. Either you could look at it either way, in that he did get enablers. And then Katie, you were a kid, I was a kid, your siblings were kids. We didn't know any better, but my mom enabled him, and your mom picked up the ball when my mom wasn't there. And when your mom would try to act out and stand up, my mom would tell her, that she's probably being too harsh on him. So, I mean, yeah, it's like your mom didn't really stand a chance. And
No, yeah, because anytime that she tried, she would either get the force of my father or your mom, you know?
right.
And it's just, I mean, what can you do when everyone is out to thwart you? Because I love that word.
Thwart, because that's one of Grandma's words. I have gotten so much feedback. I don't know about you, Katie, but people that have read our book really would like the character of Grandma to be expanded on. So perhaps in one of our future episodes, we could really dive into how did she get to be this way? How did she get to be so much in denial. I mean, to the point where everybody around her could see there was something wrong with Ken, and she didn't think they saw it. She thought she was hiding it until the day she died. She really did.
Yeah,
And it would be interesting to get your take on, because I know you had a lot of interactions with Grandma, and
right.
it was like a brick wall when it came to your dad.
Yeah, it was a little bit different, and we can definitely talk about it more, but she was an interesting character all on her own.
There you
sure.
go. Yep. And I think that was the main obstacle. And when she passed, I thought there was hope that maybe your dad would change, but he didn't live long enough for that to happen. So unfortunately, it didn't work out that way. So it's something to think about. Definitely, the one thing I'm getting out of this conversation is that depression is very real. Mental illness is very real. There's all kinds of levels of it, but we're here to talk about it. We're not claiming to be experts on it. We lived it, but that doesn't mean that we, understand everyone's point of view and understand some of the therapeutic aspects of it. So we're just trying to start a conversation. And it's interesting to me, Katie, that you have had so much depression too, because you come across, similar to how people say to me, as such a cheerful extrovert. That how can you be depressed? Like you always were the happiest one out of those three kids.
Thank you. I mean, it's the same with you though too. Growing up, before I really knew you, I think I thought you were just a very happy but kind of distant person. Just kind of kept her to yourself.
But had it together, whereas really I didn't.
And I didn't.
We were
Still
a mess.
figuring it out.
We're figuring it out, and we're helping each other with that. But it's definitely been a process. It's taking a lot of time. We definitely would welcome any kind of feedback from you listeners on your experiences with somebody with depression or depression yourself, happiness in general. Have you been able to talk yourself out of it? How have you done that? What are some of the actions? Anything on the topic, but ultimately, I think, if we can all learn how to combat the sadness in this world, it would help everyone in the long run. So feel free to reach out. What are our platforms again, Katie?
We're the Albrecht Authors on Facebook and Instagram, and our website is thealbrechtauthors.com as well. But yeah, feel free to leave a comment or reach out to us on there. We would love to hear from you.
Okay, until the next time, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye.